do. Hey, Rich, I see you tuned in. Thanks a lot, man. Here I am. I hope the sound sounds a little bit better. It is not completely fixed, but it is better for sure. I have dampened at least 10 decibels in the background noise, the physical background noise of the room. So I'm psyched. I'm psyched. All right. Oh no. All right, let's get this show on the road. Yeah, no, it's better though, isn't it? Right? There's a little bit of hum in the electronics, and I'm going to work on that, but there was like a pretty bad machine hum. You remember from being in here, and it's actually from. Actually, I thought it was at the floor. It's at the ceiling, which is good news because it means I can pad it off. Okay. Yeah. Also, I'm going to talk a little bit about that I guess right now. Okay. Here we go. Hello and welcome to the Technocrat Live. Thanks so much for tuning in. Thanks for not giving up on the show. I know I was not here last week, and I'm really sorry about that. My life has some serious legal and financial chaos. Nothing terrible. Don't panic. It's kind of like planned chaos, kind of like jumping out of a perfectly good airplane, but with a working parachute. Maybe a backup chute. We'll find out. But at least I've got a chute. Right? There's a plan. There's some water. I can, kind of dive over towards it. If I get the landing just right, maybe I'll live. I don't know. People have lived. It happens. Let me know if you've ever jumped off of a bridge or out of an airplane and lived without a parachute. I'm overdriving you're overdriving. Lower your gain. Oh, that's easy. I'll just go bloop and move my microphone away. There we go. So I can't see my levels. How about that? Is that better? I hope that's a little bit better. Let's just transition that down a bit. Let me know if that's better. It should be. Okay, so if you can't tell, I actually had some audio troubles last time. I listened to the show after. This is the problem with being your own engineer, and it was not good. It was actually pretty bad. I don't know if it's something new going on with some of my gear or if it was the noise of the room. In fact, I do know a little bit it was the noise of the room, because I isolated it. There was actually some sort of, I think it's a condenser pipe running through the room that rattles with the machine it's attached to. I managed to isolate it. It's up by the ceiling. I'm going to come up with a more permanent fix. So hopefully this is more pleasant to listen to. You can listen to the gravelly, raspy, nasty, and sometimes nasally sound of my voice. I hope that that's a pleasant experience for you. Hopefully the thoughts I'm conveying with it make it all worthwhile. I've got a face for radio. No, I'm just, I've got a voice for TV. It just worked the other way. Anyway, it's a good joke if you got hit with the ugly stick. I don't know. Let me just take a sip here. All right, so there are future plans for equipment upgrades in the studio. So I'm planning on maybe changing my microphone type. I am definitely planning on changing my camera type. I've managed to get this camera. This is a webcam. I've managed to get it looking decent. It's not great, but it's not bad. It's technically, the camera's capable of 1080p. It never really is. But it's not even the frame rate or the resolution. I really need a lens so that I can focus in and adjust for the appropriate amount of lighting, so I can increase the lighting here, so I can actually read this thing without glasses, because I have to constantly switch my glasses on and off. Anyway, so there are big plans if you have suggestions. By the way, I'm still between mugs. My Viking mug has died, so right now I'm using the dinosaurs. You may have seen them on other shows. Of course, they've turned to, you can tell I'm drinking coffee because they've turned to bones. If you have a suggestion for a mug for me, please pass it along. I got 2 suggestions. One was for a Borg cube. Thank you so much, Lee. That was an excellent suggestion. I might get the Borg cube mug for my guests, but I'm looking for something Norse. I'm looking for something appropriately Norse. I just feel like the Viking theme is the right fit for me. Okay, let's get over. And sorry, I'm just checking, make sure everything is running right. It looks like it is. I paid a little too little attention to engineering last time, and that was a mistake. Please like, love, share the show if you see it, even if you see it out of sync. And if you do see it in sync especially, although offline is okay too, please comment. I love interacting with your comments. I'm so sorry I don't have guests. Unfortunately, it's probably not going to get fixed for the next couple of weeks. I can only put casual feelers out there. I'm really busy. Like I said, I had some both some economic and some legal chaos going on. Controlled chaos, but I have to prioritize. I love doing my podcast. I love reviewing the news, the tech news, and being your designated technocrat. And if you don't have a designated technocrat, get one. Doesn't have to be me, but you better get one, because the technocrats are running everything. And if you don't understand technology and science at pretty deep level, you don't know what's going on, and you can't make any good decisions about civics, about your society, or even about your own personal life. Basic decisions that you think are in the bag are not, and things are changing very quickly, and based on the decisions that somebody makes in a cubicle someplace that even his boss doesn't know. And that's not even talking about AI, where nobody's making the decision. So, yeah, you need a designated technocrat. Get with it, man. You got to do it. Do it. Do it. Okay, so without further ado, it is a big Dystopia Report. Let's get into it. We've got 2 weeks worth of news, but the first week wasn't much, so most of it is this week, actually. All right, Dystopia Report. First section is tech. So just kind of a cool thing I've mentioned here before on the show. I've talked about the Tweel. So the Tweel is a tire wheel combo that you can buy that is not a pneumatic tire. And you could always do this with solid tires, but the thing about the Tweel is it actually has a mechanical deflection in, so it has a shape with mechanical deflection in the rubberized portion of the tire. There's no mechanical reason why Tweels shouldn't work on the highway, but there's a DOT, a national DOT regulation that says you cannot put non-inflated tires on the road. Well, I have an update from a different but adjacent technology that might solve this problem. So right now it's just bicycle tires, but it was developed by NASA to have airless bicycle tires, because of course the air pressure relative to the external pressure when there's no atmosphere, like say if you're on the moon, might be radically different. So NASA developed bicycle tires for the moon and inadvertently created a mechanical deflection technology that goes inside the tire that's reasonably cheap and reasonably light. So $500, there was a Kickstarter for it. It is now in production. And now that it's in production, $500 gets you a pair of 10-speed like tires, and the tires themselves, the inflatable part of the tire, will theoretically last the lifetime of the bicycle. So as long as the bicycle will last, the tires are expected to last too. They do have a removable, replaceable tread on the outside of them. So it's METL is the name of the tire. Check it out. They technically, the reason why I think this is interesting in a broader scale, not just for bicyclists, but for all vehicle types, is that they also have they are airtight on their rims, and they can be put on different kinds of rims, and those airtight tire tube sort of things are just used to change the comfort level of the mechanical springs inside the tires. It's actually a titanium spring inside of there. So you are expected to air up your tires a little bit, depending on how comfortable you want to be. But the tires will run perfectly fine, not aired up at all. It's just an additional comfort level thing. So this same technique could be used for highway tires to have a mechanical non-poppable tire that's also very sustainable, right? Because every time you throw out tires, you're creating a small environmental disaster. But if you can keep your tires roughly for the life of the car with maybe just replacing the tread, we're talking about a third or less of the amount of rubber replacement. And of course, a lot of that rubber got worn off on the road anyway. So very cool. I'm excited about this. I mean, of course, it doesn't help you if you destroy your tire somehow. It doesn't help you with sidewall damage necessarily, but this is still a very interesting technology. So $500 for a pair of them, so $250 a tire, and then $10 a tread replacement. Not bad, not bad. I think this technology might go somewhere, especially when it's at scale. Anyway, also in tech today, we have another you're not working from home anymore, so get your ass into the office story. Yeah, it's a long-ass announcement, so, you know. Grindr, apparently, half of their staff, so if you don't know what Grindr is, it's a dating app. It is very popular in the LGBTQ and specifically the gay community, but it is a very large app. I mean, it has 180 people working for it, which sounds like not much, but when you consider the scale, how much that typically one admin will be running hundreds or even thousands of servers. Yeah, that's actually a pretty big small-size tech or small or medium tech company. Half of their staff quit when the company required that they go back in for 2 days a week, required. So yeah, I mean, this is really, really shocking. So the first thing that comes to mind is, you know, what's going on with this? I mean, you know, like, you think that more than half of the people would want to keep their jobs. Hey, what's up? Hey, what's up, Bourbon State? Hey, Ariella, how's it going? Thanks for tuning in. Yeah, so yeah, you would think that they would have people would like need their jobs and not quit. You know, half seems really gratuitous. I agree. I mean, you know, if they're financially well off enough, I mean, I've done it. I've been a financially well off enough tech to quit a job that just wasn't working for me. It wasn't a good match anymore. So I could see how that could be the case. But I do have one thing to say about this, which is really the reason this is super interesting, is this might be a preview of a pending backlash for Amazon. So maybe Amazon will have problems as well, where nobody wants to go to work. And so right now, Amazon, based on the people who complained online in Amazon, figure approximately half of those people could potentially not go to work anymore. So there was 33,000 people who complained online on Amazon. So they might be looking at, you know, replacing 18,000 people all at once when they're you have to come to work for 3 days a week, mandatory demand comes into place. So this actually might be a major tech upset, because of course these are going to probably be higher end people. Usually the higher you're up on the tech ladder, the less important it is you are for the bulk of your work physically, with the exception of if you're managing large amounts of other people. But, you know, some developers are doing more critical code than others. Yeah, okay. So anyway, and of course there's a lot more tech companies talking about forcing their employees to work, especially after Zoom forced their employees to work and said, well, even though we're Zoom, you still have to come to work because it's not even working to do remote. And they have a whole lineup of remote products that, of course, did really well during the pandemic. That's what, you know, people even verbalized it and called it, verbaged it, and called remote teleconferencing Zooming. It's just Zooming now. That's what people call it. So, yeah, interesting. They own the word, and they can't even get their people to stay organized through the video. Anyway, that's it for tech. It's actually a fairly small, pure tech section, although there's a big tech government section coming up later. Let's get into entertainment. So I don't know if you're into the Marvel universe, but the Marvel VFX artists or workers have voted to unionize. They are not currently unionized. You would think that they would be under the Stage Workers Union, which is the IATSE, but they are not. They are not under any union. So it looks like they are going to be joining the Marvel specific VFX graphics techs. Maybe have voted to, and unless something happens to stop this, unless Disney stops it somehow, have voted to unionize, and now they are a union shop for computer graphics and for FX, for 3D effects. All right, we got a comment here. Management wants a gang to come in 2 or 3 times a week in 2024. A huge number in the department started looking for new jobs already. Wow. That's crazy. There is an outright tech rebellion among companies that are requiring people to come back in, and I get both sides. The numbers are there, man. It doesn't work as well for people to work from home exclusively. Doesn't mean they have to go into the office every single day. But when they work from home exclusively, they do not connect with the other people. I don't necessarily think that it's a problem for the better communicators. It's probably a problem for the people who need to work with the siloed and the people who are like, I'll just do the minimal effort kind of crowd. Because then you kind of have to go stand over their desk and glare at them until they get the work done. Which, if you can't stand over their desk and glare at them because their desk is in their house and you're 50 miles away or 3,000 miles away, then I could see how that could become a problem. Anyway, so I get that, but at the same time, people have people's lifestyles, people's lives revolve around them working from home, and it's very expensive. You got to eat out, you spend hours a day commuting, and if you don't feel comfortable, like if you get motion sick or something, you can't work on the train or whatever you're doing, or if you're in a car, forget it. It's just misery, and it's crazy, So I get both sides of this. It's gonna be very interesting to see how this plays out. People are very passionate. Maybe they can't get childcare. Maybe they don't want to have to trust someone with childcare. So yeah. Anyway, so good for Marvel. I'm happy for them. Generally speaking, I have views on all over the political spectrum. I'm generally a fan of unions, although they clearly can get out of control. So spend a lot more money on things that don't necessarily benefit their employees. So a little better than 6 for one, half dozen for the other. It's one of the better. One of the better things to come out of the complex on the left. So I will just say that. And this is the thing that's really interesting here is this requirement. If you're a VFX artist, whether you want this to happen or not in Marvel, you are now part of the union because they a vast majority voted it in, and this could become an increasing reality in IT across the country, and this is very interesting that this is. I'm going to tie this back into the comment and to the last story. This could be something that happens with tech workers. The first issue that the union may pursue is tech workers not having to not work from home. This may become a strike issue. And of course, if you're working for a big IT shop and for some reason you don't like unions, you're now faced with the possibility that you may have to quit your job because you don't like the way that the job information and personnel flow is working anymore, or the way the salary structure is working, or you may just not be, you may be philosophically against unions, or had bad experiences with a union in a job of yours. Generally speaking, I've found them to be somewhere between neutral and very good. So I doubt that's going to happen, but there will be people, and so something to think about for the future. The story's in Rolling Stone if you want to read more. There's lots of details. Okay, so that's it for entertainment, which this could have easily, by the way, gone into tech or tech government. There's a lot of stories like that today, so I did my best to categorize them. Not that that's super important, but to wrap your brain around it, because tech is complicated, which is kind of the point. You gotta kind of have a conversation about it. You don't know what the heck's going on. Tech government. So we got a bombshell headline in tech government. We've got 4 fairly large tech government stories, different governments, and none of them are good. It's almost always bad. Just like science is usually a good section, tech government's usually a bad one. As soon as the government gets, there's a pattern to this. When government gets involved in tech, bad stuff happens. It turns out that I could have put this in science, but it's not a study, so I just didn't. It isn't really science; it's a science adjacent. So I put it in tech government. There is a whistleblower that is claiming the CIA bribed their own internal department. So some group of people in the CIA literally used CIA incentives to bribe the group that was put in charge of deciding whether COVID-19 was a lab leak or zoonotic. So just to make that clear, whether it was created by scientists in the lab in Wuhan or whether it jumped from an animal to a human. That's what we're talking about. And originally this department in the CIA was leaning towards a jump from an animal to a human. It was leaning towards the lab created it because you have this high-end, almost military level genetics disease-specific lab in Wuhan, and it made sense with what they were working on, and they were basically paid off to not talk about it. That is the accusation from the whistleblower. Of course, everything with any government story, you're probably only going to get the truth out of the gate, and then the story is going to change. And you never really know what's true. So someone's going to say, well, that can't possibly be true because blah, 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 blah. But the thing is, because everything here is highly secure and behind walls, it's going to be hard to tell. You're going to have to use your judgment. But usually, in my experience, the first story to come out is the true one, and then everything after that is spin, where they try to reverse it. So it looks like at least one of our own government agencies miscalled it wrong for COVID. Now the question is, if you haven't thought about this, you might be like, well, why would they do that? Well, I mean, this is a huge political and even military level row. I mean, if this came out of a military monitored lab in China, this is a military failure and a military accident at best, and maybe an attack at worst, which then, of course, puts the onus back, just like on 9/11, puts the onus back on the United States government. That this is an attack and you have to respond. So that's really dangerous, heavy-duty stuff with a lot of implications. I mean, China's a nuclear power. For some reason, you didn't know that. They have massive armies. They have massive reserves of military equipment. So getting into even a skirmish with them would not be a trivial thing. It may have been a game of chicken and we lost, and our own intelligence agency said, that's we're not doing this right now. We have a pandemic to solve. Also, it's possible from a foreign power like China, where basically someone in the CIA paid someone else in the CIA off not to call it a lab leak, instead to call it zoonotic, which looks like not true. Now there's so many sources now saying that's not true. And remember, lots of people were kicked off of social media for saying that it was true, that it did come from the Wuhan lab. Like, people were just fact checked and then kicked off. So this is a massive freedom of speech, and totalitarianism, or even in some case, fascism being an extreme case of totalitarianism, fascism. But anyway, in any case, iron hammer government controlling speech, because that's what works for them, not because it's what works for the country as a whole, or even for their military readiness. So holy cow, this is huge. It's not being covered that much, but if you've been following here, I've been trying to suss out the shadier, sketchier, more dangerous stories about what really happened with COVID, and we have not gotten even close to the whole story. Okay, anyway, that's it for that story. Let's go on to Israel. And supposedly this is an Israeli company, but, of course, if a company is allowed to run amok with foreign powers and their government does nothing to stop them for long enough, you kind of have to go, hey, does that company actually just a shell company working for the government? We do it with North Korea, we do it with China, we do it with Russia. We should do it with everyone, even our allies. And it looks like that may be the case, because this has been going on for a while. The Israeli firm NSO executed a 0-day on iOS. So in case you're not clear, a 0-day is a remote. This is a remote 0-day, a 0-day where you could be your system could be attacked. Hold on a second, I gotta make an adjustment here. I'll apologize for that. Where your system can be attacked remotely with no warning. In other words, even if you updated your phone yesterday or an hour ago, your computer can be attacked remotely immediately. And so there was a 0-day in iOS, which is iPhones, if you're not familiar with what iOS is. And this affected some U.S. government officials. The name of the company is NSO, and they've already been blacklisted by some American firms and government agencies. So this is like, almost like war footing kind of action. So, not a great look there, Israel. Patches came out last Friday, 9/8, and it's for the Pegasus spyware. I don't know the name of the vulnerability, but the type of spyware that can run on it is the Pegasus spyware. There was an organization called Citizen Labs, and they're the ones who found the hole. So basically, they found the hole, and someone ignored Israeli company that's known for doing this immediately attacked some government officials' iPhones. What? Yeah, this is, like I said, not a good look. Anyway, so if you want to read more about that story, that's TechCrunch. And by the way, the CIA story was on science.org, so don't expect to find that in every mainstream source. But science.org is a very credible source, so lots of good science stories coming from there. Okay, so have you been plagued by fake profile requests on Facebook? People who are like, hey, I know you, let's be friends. But they don't know you, and they're not your friend, and they're not even people? Yeah, well, a lot of people have, it turns out. And Facebook has actually been saying that this company, Voyager, has made 38,000 fake Facebook and Instagram accounts. And those are just the ones they found, and I bet there's a whole lot more. I mean, I feel like all of them have tried to be my friend. And that was on as of 1/23. LinkedIn is another one too, but they specifically talking about the Meta properties, and maybe just because Facebook admitted it, so credit to them, and LinkedIn isn't admitting it. But yes, you do get weird requests on LinkedIn all the time too. Depends on how active you are and how important they think you are, because I've been both active and inactive, and it slows down when you slow down. Unlike Facebook, which doesn't seem to have any rhyme or reason to it, they just seem to come in waves. And you really got to look at someone's profile. Keep this in mind, by the way, if you're using social media and you turn down your profile so much that strangers can't see anything on your profile. Because if you're a real person and you try to make friends, if they're technically inclined, they're probably going to say no, because they can't see that you have anything on your timeline. And as a result, they may just assume that you're one of these bots. But wait, it gets worse. Wait till you hear who's hiring this company, Voyager, to do this. It's New York City. That's right. So New York City has given over $9 million in 2018, and paid $9 million. I guess it was an upfront fee in 2018, and just paid $1.6 million to renew their services with Voyager in 2021. So if you're like, hey, who's creating all these fake accounts, pretending to be a human, and then trying to infiltrate me on Instagram, Facebook, and whatnot, some of that may actually be New York City, which, by the way, has a global scale, an international country global scale intelligence agency, and has ever since 9/11. So they are kind of like a whole country when it comes to intel. And I mean, as far as I know, they don't have spies, but they might. I mean, the UN is here, so I can't believe it. This is actually taxpayer money going to make fake accounts of Facebook. So theguardian.com, if you want to know more. Guardian's credible source. So, and New York City didn't just stop there. They're having a hell of a week. When you're just a city and you are making the global news cycle week after week for massive privacy invasions and wasteful privacy invasions, you might be evil. You might be your own worst enemy. Yeah. So anyway, last week, New York City started using drones to spy on people's backyard parties. In other words, if somebody had a backyard party that was big enough and noisy enough and went late enough so that it violated some ordinances, New York City sent in a drone to watch you. What? I mean, this is just crazy spooky. People can't even party in their own backyards. I mean, why even live here? So, shame on you, and this is crazy. And, I mean, I would have less of a problem with this if it was people were spilling out into the street. That's different. But if you have space on private land and people stay more or less constrained to it, I'm not talking about somebody to walking out front to smoke a cigarette. If there's, dozens or hundreds of people spilling out into the street, I get that. But, oh, my God, you shouldn't be using... Yeah, that is why people are moving away from New York City. And that's why people are moving away from New York, too, because sometimes these laws that we find, these things we find out New York City is doing are really state laws. And sometimes they ask for them and sometimes they didn't, but they seem to always use them. Yeah, move to a free state. I wish I could, but... well, we'll see. Look, I love New York City. There's some things here that are amazing, and there have been, but it has been getting worse. And I think that... And it's weird. Like sometimes with stuff like this project's been going on for years with the drones, and they've been fighting the public. There is a law on the books that says they can't just spy on people. And that's how we found out about this, because it was reported. So it may be that other localities are doing this too, and New York City just has the civil liberties law in the book where they have to report it. So that's kind of the upside, but yeah, I mean, wherever your locality is, you should really pay attention and find out if you're being spied on by drones, because it may be perfectly legal in your state or your municipality, and the cops may just be watching you guys. So keep an eye out for drones. There's still the question. There's different rules everywhere about drones flying over your property. Generally speaking, drones that fly high enough, like in actual airspace, are safe from you. You can't do anything to them legally without penalties. But if they go low enough, every state varies. So you may be able to just shoot them out of the sky. That is not legal advice, just for the record. But check with your local laws, because you don't know what it is. I mean, it's the same thing as if someone were to break into your house and didn't identify themselves, and later on you found out they were law enforcement. As far as you knew, they were a burglar there to kill you. And I know burglars don't normally kill, but it can happen, and they might if they don't want to witness. So it is big. It is big time to shoot drones out of the sky. Yeah, I mean, I don't know what the rules are, but I have heard of this. I have heard of people shooting drones when they go into the airspace. There was actually a case in one state where it was kind of ambiguous, so there was a big court battle over it, where somebody flew a fairly expensive drone over his neighbor's yard, and his neighbor shot it out of the sky. So, but it wasn't clear cut. Like, it's a big FAA thing. It's a big FAA thing that it's bad or it's good. I don't understand. It's very illegal. Okay. Sure. I mean, I guess the laws have changed. So FAA, of course, is federal, so that would apply to the whole country. Maybe they stepped in because it was a patchwork of laws, and we were getting different results. I mean, where the heavens, that's a legal term, starts is very much codified in law. So that's what the drones were stuck with at first, was aerospace law, but drones weren't regulated as far as that's concerned. But it may also be possible to use a net to pull it out of the sky. I don't know. Whatever. I'm not encouraging this. I'm just saying that, like, I mean, the other alternative is use lawyers to pull it out of the sky. I mean, it just feels like it's one thing if people can't go to protests and protests are captured. I mean, protests have been captured for a long time, and because the ability to just use cell phone footage or even cell tower check-ins and pings to see where people are and who they're with and what they're doing is been fairly trivial for a couple of decades now. So if you go to a protest, and you're not harassed by the government, then the government's at least okay with what you're doing, which maybe means it isn't a protest. Something to think about. Don't break commandment number 0. Don't get caught. Yeah, I mean, obviously, right? You know, don't wave and identify yourself and give them your social security number before you shoot it out of the sky. But look, again, not legal advice. Just saying, you know, people are fed up. I mean, there was just a law that was passed in New Mexico banning firearms, and there was a massive protest, like where people brought their firearms in direct defiance of the law. And by the way, the law was it was an executive order and was struck down. But before it was struck down, they did that. So I mean, that was like they could theoretically have all gone to jail. So people are getting fed up. I'm kind of more commentating on the social trends here. I'm not saying people should go in a particular direction, to be clear. Okay. Anyway, yeah. So that's it for tech government. New York City, of course, taking the cake with 2 pretty massive privacy violations and wasteful practices that are creepy. All right, on to Technocrat Society. Yeah, I mean, I actually have 3 stories in a new section I'm calling Technocrat Society because I think that the social effects have gotten to the point that they're starting to have secondary effects on non-technocrats. So just what the technocrats are doing with each other is starting to affect normal people. And in this case, the technocrats I'm talking about are college-age kids. So it looks like Gen Z isn't going to college. So from 2022 to 2020 to 2012, there was from 2012 to 2022. So in the decade for 2022 and a decade back, there was a 4 million person student enrollment drop in college. So it seems like Generation Z just doesn't think there's any value in college. So just to put this in perspective, 47% of boomers generally, when polled, thought that college was valuable, and we know a lot less than that went to college. 45% of Generation X, so it's kind of just a blip. It was in the same direction. Here's a really weird part. 63% of millennials think that college was valuable. So a lot of millennials got very excited about college, and they're probably the ones that seem to be getting the jack the worst. But Generation Z is coming in at 41%. So they are the lowest. They place the lowest value on college since before the Greatest Generation. Wow. Holy cow. Generation Z is done with college. They don't care. So generally speaking, also when they do go to college, they don't party. They're there to educate themselves specifically for the purpose of getting a job. So very practical. And I can appreciate that. I mean, you know, like there's more all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy. But at the same time, you're paying a lot of money for college now. So I get that. So the interest is mostly in the Gen Z that are going to college are mostly in STEM. That's the good news. So STEM is the thing that we really can't live without. So, but the thing that they're not going to school for is the humanities. Enrollment in the humanities has plunged. You know, the old joke about, you know, going to college for basket weaving. The millennials loved it. Generation Z hates it. They're not doing it. So the poor basket weaving professor is probably going to have to resort to doing artisan acoustic guitar solos in the local coffee shop because he ain't going to be working at the college much longer the way this is going. Yeah, anyway, so is the real question I have about this is, I mean, you know, is not going to college becoming an intelligence test? You know, when college is expensive enough, at some point you got to go, how smart is the guy that encumbers himself with $200,000 in debt for a master's degree and then comes and applies at my job? You know, he's going to be a slave to this college. Yeah, sure, he'll be slavishly working away for my company, but it's not the best financial decision. And I mean, it's not like it's unprecedented to use people's financial decisions and hiring practices. And I will cite, you know, kind of blowing up in their face, Definitely not what Gen Z is doing here in Houston. Oh, okay. Hey, Melissa, thanks for tuning in. Yeah, I mean, but the numbers are panning out. I mean, they're just maybe it's that Houston's university is cheaper, less expensive. I mean, I just recently been to a college fair with my son, and the price range of colleges is wildly staggering between the cheapest state schools, some of which are very good, and the most expensive private schools. I mean, we're talking about an order of magnitude different in price or more, even more than an order of magnitude difference in price. So if there's cheap, good state-sponsored or state-subsidized schools in Houston, or the schools were never subsidized in the first place, that might explain it. You know, one of the things is the rising costs. That's one of the things that Gen Z cites. So if they're cheap, yeah, that makes sense. I mean, why not? If it's cheap, you know, and your parents are willing to assist you in the process, then, you know, there's nothing wrong with learning. But you can learn almost anything you need to learn on the internet. So, yeah, I do appreciate the comment. But, you know, yeah, I mean, it's maybe that's something you got to do, too. Maybe that's something employers are going to start doing, too, not only looking at the financial decision-making of whether they went to college or not, but looking at the financial decision-making of which college they went to. You know, like, did you go to the absolute most expensive college, you know, for your trade? Because that's kind of what people are doing. Texas A&M is a state, but not cheap. Okay, well, you know, I'm not sure what's going on there. I didn't do the research, but I'd love to hear people. Oh, and we got Jay Con. Thanks for tuning in, Jay Con. What about community college? Yeah, I mean, community college is excellent. I mean, in my experience, a lot of life is who you know, not just what you know. I mean, as a guy who went to a state school, but then created a user group for Linux users, having that network of people was one of the most valuable things I got out of my computer science degree. So I didn't need to go to an expensive college to get the network advantage of going to an expensive college. So if you do it right and you kind of hack the system a little and you make sure to network extensively whatever college you go to, that will benefit you. As far as learning gaps between the high-end colleges and the low-end colleges, it's really just comes down to your Rolodex. I mean, there's a lot of jokes about, you know, the top 3 Ivy League schools producing all the politicians. I don't know what to say. I mean, it's true. A lot of them, a disturbing amount of them, come from that, and they all are on each other's speed dials, which may explain partly why they became successful politicians. And let's not get into the names. Remember, we don't do politics on here, which means no names. That's how we handle that. No names of parties or people. But anyway, yeah, this is a really tough question. A lot of this is not from this. This is rgj.com. If you want to learn more. Oh, no, sorry. This is MSN.com, so the Microsoft networking, www.msn.com if you want to learn more about this study. There's a little more detail. I did reorganize the information because they had it scattered all over the article. They were trying to, like, spin it, I think. I don't know. I mean, it's going to be pretty devastating financially for the colleges if things don't shape up soon. Again, with exceptions like Texas A&M. I know the state schools aren't doing too bad in New York. I have no idea how the private schools are doing financially, but I know enrollment is down. Net enrollment is way down across the country. So, as per these stats. All right, so so this one's from rjg.com. This is Technocrat Society. Burning Man drowned. So, yeah, it looks like for the first time, and Burning Man's going on for a while, decades for sure. Of course, this is nowhere near here, but it is in the desert. A lot of people from the West Coast and the California area will go to that thing. It rained a lot, and it's because it's the desert. There's no vegetation, so the entire campsite turned into 6 inches of mud. There was an order that they weren't even allowed to go. People weren't even allowed to leave. They were essentially trapped in a muddy hell in their tents, and I'm sure some of those people did not pack provisions as if they were roughing it in the wild because they were there to party and were planning on buying their food, for instance. So what are you going to do in that situation? A lot of people who packed heels and walked barefoot for a week or more. I mean, there were days you couldn't get out of there. So I don't know what happened with that. But if you go check out the pictures and the video, it's pretty wild. So, yeah, just kind of a funny story. But at the same time, it's reminiscent of some things going really wrong with outdoor social occasions. There's a couple of, well, never mind. That's a different story. But anyway, check it out. If Burning Man interests you, there's some interesting, funny stories about that. I'm not going to get into more detail, but I thought it was worth mentioning. And the last thing in Technocrat Society, Health and Human Services, which is a government agency that, among other things, makes recommendations to the DEA and the FTC. So the FTC, of course, being the Federal Drug Commission, and the DEA being the Drug Enforcement Agency. They have recommended that marijuana be removed from Schedule 1 status at a federal level. Holy cow, this has been a long time coming. And if you don't, I'm not like a marijuana fan, but it's been a lot of revolutionary kind of things in the news lately. By the way, look into it if you missed last week. I had a story. If you do smoke marijuana, legal marijuana in your state legal anyway, marijuana, make sure you know what state you're sourcing it from, because when you inhale marijuana that has soaked up the lead from the soil, which it soaks up almost all of it, it soaks up a lot of heavy metals, if you inhale it, 100% of that lead goes into your system. So try to look for marijuana from states with tough lead laws. The advantage of not doing illegal drugs. Major safety issue. So anyway, so the standard for a Schedule 1 drug, illegal drug in the United States, is no accepted medical use. How dated is the Schedule 1 status of marijuana that the claim federally is there's no accepted medical use? You got 30-something, almost 40 states with some sort of legality status. I don't even. I'm probably out of date. It probably is most of them at this point, and most of those states will, at the very least, prescribe it for pain relief, like legit, not like pain relief. Like legit pain relief from like cancer, or as an appetite enhancer for people who have appetite problems. It gives you the munchies. It's actually a clinical symptom, and if you're having trouble eating, it can help you. So those are two easy, off the top of my head, cases where there are widespread acceptable medical uses for marijuana. So Schedule 1 status is completely ridiculous. I mean, why do the feds hate pot? I just don't get it. Anyway, even if you hate pot, even if you hate pot, you should be against massive miscategorizations like this. One of the side effects of this, by the way, is that marijuana stocks will be able to list, because it won't be a Schedule 1 drug anymore. So if they actually make this change, that'll be amazing. So for those stocks, because they'll actually be able to get funding and expand their operations. And for things like with this lead issue, that probably means the quality control will go up. So that's also very exciting news, and maybe even the price will come down a bit. All good things. That's Reuters.com. Doesn't get more mainstream than that. And that is it for Technocrat Society. Let's get into science. All right, so science. So this is a study with various scholarly PhDs that was I pulled off of Nature.com. It was published in a different journal, but it is published in a scientific journal. And I picked this up from Sci.news. Human ancestors. So this is a genetic anthropology story. Human ancestors may have roots in simultaneous evolution in Africa and Europe. So it's been widely accepted in the recent past, like for decades at least, that human beings walked out of Africa into Europe and Asia, and so the Homo sapien mutation happened in Africa, and then the mutated, what we now know as Homo sapiens, walked up into the other continents. It's looking like that's not the case, and there's actually a bigger story here. This is based on a set of bones that were found in Turkey, and they named these bones Endolivius. This is actually pretty hard evidence that human ancestors did not exclusively walk out of Africa. What does this mean? Well, it's actually this very strong evidence based on Neanderthal DNA being found in Europe, and there was another. It wasn't. I think it wasn't. Was it Homo erectus? Or there was another one too, where there's actually, it looks like there's at least 4 now variations of pre-humans that were sexually compatible and intermating on a regular basis. So not to say that they were like having a big caveman orgy, but to say that they were humans, with an exception, have been monogamous for most of their genetic history. Most primates, no, I shouldn't say most primates. Some primates are, some aren't. Yeah. So this looks like, but who they chose for a mate varied widely. And we know that from genetics, by the way. So that's not speculation, but yeah, we know also from genetics that there was a lot of cross mating across pre-human species, and that may have actually been the source. Basically, being randy and being open to different sexual encounters may have been the source of the rapid changes in human mutation, as far as the resulting. Sexual diversity may have been the not just mutation, may have been the source of that sexual variety may have been the source of the final profile that we think of as Homo sapiens, of a more advanced species that was more capable of more complex organization, more complex thought, had the thinking power that we think of as in modern humans. So very interesting, very different story than what we've been told up until pretty recently. And here is the real, here's a real ringer with this. So New York Times, right around the time that this, a couple like days or weeks after this story came out announcing another study, saying that there's now a group of scientists, a small group of scientists, that think that the human bottleneck. So if you're not familiar with the human bottleneck, it's widely understood that about 100,000 years ago, human beings got whittled down to a couple of thousand mating pairs, and it's thought that this correlated to some sort of major disaster on the planet, and specifically an ice age or such. But anyway, and that's when human beings diverge from Neanderthals. It's a very bad study. It doesn't seem to have any credibility. So as far as it contradicts a bunch of other widely accepted and growing studies. It's interesting that the Times would get behind this particular story at this time. So looking at the history of a species, or specifically of the human species, based on genetic samples taken from remains, is kind of known as genetic anthropology. It's kind of more like genetic archaeology, but whatever. The name is genetic anthropology. I'll just go along with it. Anthropology is like archaeology of people, but anthropology is like really different than this. But genetic anthropology is, hey, where did we come from based on the genes of dead humans or human ancestors that we find. So the thing that's really interesting to me about this is, and I hate to get ahead of myself, but is that my original and novel scientific theories of Civ gene, or the civilization gene as I called it, this idea that people evolved from psychopaths and that there was a mutation in us that either vastly enhanced, and I'm expanding my definition a little bit because I've been seeing a little more evidence of simultaneous evolution of empathy in other animals, but not at our scale, and definitely not with a time component to it. It doesn't give them the power of seeing the future, which we can do. We can look at things in terms of past, present, future. But anyway, so that there was a mutation that basically added empathy to the human genome, and that before that, the human beings were essentially all psychopaths, and we acted very much like psychopaths. So we're all still psychopaths, but we have empathy on top of that, so we can always revert to psychopath behaviors, but that we have empathy on top of that. There's a reason for that, because all the psychopathic behaviors are available to people with empathy and are demonstrated in limited cases, but the people without empathy simply don't demonstrate it. So that the easiest way to prove that this is true, that SIVG is 100% true, and this is exactly what happened, is through genetic anthropology. So this is very interesting that they're going after a major shift by supporting this oddball study and not this other one. So anyway, so Sci.News is the good study, and New York Times is the bad one. In the comments before you go, if you think the sound is better than last week, we had some problems actually, a couple problems. There were some minor problems with my filters on OBS, and also I had some extra noise in the room from a heat pump pipe in the room, and I actually isolated it and muffled it. So I think I lost about 10 decibels of just junk noise, so I should sound a lot better. I do have a plan to improve the microphones maybe with boom mics at some point to get them out of sight, but also to not have to mess around with lapel mics, which I love. I actually prefer lapel mics, but without an engineer, I don't want to get into futzing with people's lapel mics constantly. Anyway, so that's the technical plan for the show. I do have some equipment upgrades planned. Nothing like wild, but I could use a better camera, better microphones, better sound deadening. Anyway, let me know what you think of the sound, if you think it's okay. And thanks so much for tuning in. That's it for Dystopia Report. Like, love, don't forget to share this and tell other people, and to subscribe. If for some reason you're seeing this for the first time and you're not subscribed, I'm just going to keep going. And I usually do interviews, but this has been a crazy month for me. I've been too busy to schedule interviews, and honestly, I could use the extra hours that I'm not spending either writing interviews or actually doing the interview itself. So I'm going to probably not even try to book interviews for the next couple of weeks at least. But I will be bringing you the news every week, so come and tune in and check in and tell me what you think. All right, so thank you so much for tuning in. Choose wisely. Choose to share. Good night, everyone.